In this video, I'd like to familiarise you briefly with one of our motion modifiers here, which goes by the name of Quaternion Booster. Quaternion Booster itself has no interface, and what it basically does is change the way that recorded rotations work in Lightwave. Or rather, it modifies how Euler axes are handled. Contrary to its name, it does not give you a Quaternion rotation method. Rather, what it does is to modify the way that Lightwave keys things in order to give you the benefits that you would see with Quaternion. So here I've got my camera, and what I'm going to do is switch over to the rotate tool and go into local axis. I'm going to come out here to frame 20, let's say, and I'm going to pitch myself around here about 90 degrees on the pitch there. Now, of course, ordinarily this would have us in gimbal lock, and we have no method to swing side to side. Of course, if I switch to local axis, come out, say, another 20 frames, and then I use the local axis handles to turn myself, say, 90 degrees this way, what we would normally expect to see on account of Euler rotations and the rotation order is for us to get a drift round to reach this point. However, you'll notice that with the Quaternion booster applied, no such thing happens. I get a proper tip to the gimbal lock position, and then it tips square over without drifting around. You'll notice that if I disable Quaternion Booster, that changes entirely, and we are back to having our drifty behaviour there between these two keyframes. If I switch back to parent axis, then of course we see with Quat Booster off what is happening. The bank and the heading there are sort of overlapping one another to give the rotation that causes it to be drifted in the middle. But if we look with Quat Booster on at what happens, we'll see that as soon as we achieve gimbal lock there, boom, everything gets snapped right over. And of course, if you look at the numbers down in the little channel box there, you can see that as soon as I cut over, bang, the heading and the bank both jump in numbers instantaneously. If I bake these keys off with the Quat Booster turned on, I can turn it off, and we see that of course our motion like that has been properly baked. What we can see, however, happens if we look at our channels here, we see that there's this sudden jump in both the heading and the bank axes there. This is what's known as an Euler flip, and if we come into fractional keyframes, we can still see this little tiny amount of drift still occurs at that point. So Quat Booster is a handy little tool to allow items to be animated using the local axis manipulators. However, you do need to be aware that it can make your keyframes, or rather your key graphs, experience sudden jumps, which might be of import if you're going to render with motion blur. And of course, it should also be remembered that you need to have the thing kept on and turned on, or of course do a post bake afterwards. So there we see Quat Booster, handy tool for getting us around the gimbal and Euler problem with rotations, and can in some instances get us away from the need to use offsets or other sorts of methods.